Every so often, there can be a moment of clarity at White House briefings, even in 2020. So I want you to begin with me tonight by looking at a telling moment, a bad one for Donald Trump, as his own staff failed to handle the continuing fallout for this debate message telling the Proud Boys to stand by, while he also refused to condemn white supremacists. Any rational person among the 73 million people who watched this debate knows that happened. And in this case, it fell to a Fox News reporter pressing the factual question about what happened, and then you'll see. The reporter seems visibly disappointed that the sitting president's spokesperson could not simply condemn this today.
Does the president denounce white supremacism and groups that espouse it in all their forms?
This has been answered yesterday by the president himself, the day before by the president himself on the debate stage. The president was asked this. He said, sure, 3 times. He has condemned white supremacy more than any president in modern history.
Just to clear it up this morning, can you, naming it, make a declarative statement that you denounce, that the president denounces?
I just did. The president was asked this. You're contriving a storyline and a narrative.
No, he wasn't, he said. And fact check true. He wasn't contriving a storyline, and he happens to work for Fox News, which brings me to a fairly basic point. That entire exchange kind of echoed the low point of the debate in miniature, if you think about it. A Trump representative clashing with a Fox News personality over the very basic request that a president oppose hate and white supremacist racism, the kind of racism that America has spent much of its history trying to overcome and improve upon in our society, in our laws. It's an ugly history that we all know Americans fought wars over, amended the Constitution over, and I'll even say at some high points, that we've crossed ideological and party lines over. Now, Trump's former aides here are appalled. H.R. McMaster noting dryly that condemning white supremacists should be a layup for any leader. There's that word, leader. Of course, what McMaster and so many others, even those who've worked for Donald Trump, are telling voters at this key time before they vote is that Trump is no leader. Now, the fallout over that moment and the debate in general does continue. Other insiders just blasting Donald Trump's statements about the Proud Boys as nuts, total lunacy, saying he blew that for sure. Top Republican Karl Rove dubbing Trump's performance the debate from hell, and saying the attempt to be aggressive came off as both rude and undisciplined. I want to bring in our experts tonight, Donny Deutsch, our colleague here at MSNBC, Michelle Goldberg for the New York Times, and Roland Martin, managing editor of Unfiltered. Roland, your thought of what factually occurred in that moment of the debate and how the White House is on defense over it well into tonight.
A statement of condemnation from Donald Trump, either at the debate or even from Kayleigh McEnany, is absolutely irrelevant. The question is Donald Trump and the Republican Party purposely and openly courting white supremacists? The answer is yes. There's only one party where you've had multiple Republicans ask county chairs to step down. That's in Texas because of racist statements and memes. Not only that, who has one of the biggest racists in Congress? Steve King, Republican from Iowa. You got Marjorie Greene, racist, coming in from Georgia, who's likely going to get elected. You got a racist, Laura Loomer, running as a Republican in Florida right now. You have Mitch McConnell. You got photos of him standing in front of Confederate flags, accepting awards. Steve Scalise talking to white supremacist groups. Not only that, this is also the same party that today defends Confederate statues and monuments and the Confederate flag. You had the Southern Dixiecrats from the period of slavery all through Jim Crow, who was standing in the way of voting rights for black people. Today, it's the Republican Party. The governor of Texas today just said, forget the drop-off boxes in multiple counties there because they're targeting Democrats. They target voting rights for black people. They target Muslims. They target Hispanics. The Republican Party provides aid and comfort to white supremacists in America, period.
Michelle?
Well, you know, as I was waiting to come on your show, a producer or someone in my ear said, stand by. And it was very obvious what that meant, right? It meant sit tight until we need you. It didn't mean go away. It didn't mean stand back. And, you know, I think Donald Trump is paradoxical because he's such a prolific liar, but he also in some ways is very honest in that he has a hard time hiding his feelings. Right? We know when Donald Trump hates someone, and when he doesn't hate someone, when he supports someone, even if it would be in his interest, even if it would be in his political interest, he has a very hard time even mouthing the words, right? Even kind of putting on an act of meeting this basic baseline of civic decency. And I think his support for the Proud Boys, his wink and nudge, and for other sorts of right-wing militias, and in general, the sort of pro-vigilante turn in the Republican Party, their open celebration of this 17-year-old who allegedly killed protesters in Kenosha. You have to take that you have to understand that in the context of the president threatening the election, of the president saying that he wants his supporters to go and act as ad hoc poll watchers, by which he means sort of show up and intimidate people, something we've already seen happen in Virginia. He knows that I think he knows that he is not going to win this election legitimately. And so in some sense, he can't afford to alienate his shock troops. He's counting on them.
Yeah, I think both of you have made the important connections from the rhetoric here, which so many Americans watch because candidates speak to each other in these debates, or over each other, as it were, to the actions. Texas very affirmatively limiting access to what is lawful voting in a state that was governed under the Voting Rights Act and the pre-clearance process precisely because of a judicial finding of a history of racism. Not my words, not Roland's words, just what the evidence exhaustively under oath in court established. And that is reinforced here then by, as Michelle illuminates, that strategy. And so all of that comes together. And Donny, I'm going to get to you, stay with me, but I want to put some other evidence on the table, which is you have a campaign on the Biden side that's discussing this as if they're up by a good amount. And yet 33 days out, there are, yes, clear signs Trump is trailing in state polls and in some early voting data and fundraising, and in these signs, as Michelle mentioned, that they're operating like they're behind. But even if being a bit behind now doesn't mean much about the final results, and people who oppose Trump may just like the idea that he's behind and losing, but using the wrong evidence over time is not only inaccurate, but as a political matter, it may undercut the strategy and actions that Trump's opponents take. So Biden's approach to debates or spending money could be really different whether the premise is, one, Biden's winning and needs to just hold on, steady as she goes, rather than a premise that it's tied or even Biden might be down. So as the panel stays with me, I want to show everyone tonight something pretty important that we've put together briefly. Data that you might hear less about, a comparison of the battleground states that Trump actually won narrowly last time compared to today. Florida. At this point in Florida, Clinton was up 2 points on Trump. That's within the margin of error. Biden right now doing worse than she was then, roughly deadlocked. Now, that, of course, is a big swing state, and there is math where a Democrat could lose Florida and win the election. But also look at some of these key blue-leaning states historically. Warnings here for Biden tonight. In Pennsylvania, Clinton was up by 12 points. That was seen then as the kind of state lead that's insurmountable, allows you to move resources away in traditional math. Well, she lost. Biden leads Trump there by less, by only 9 points right now. Or the very famous Wisconsin, which Democrats do tend to need to ever win the Electoral College. Clinton was leading by a narrow 4 points around this time and lost. Biden leads Trump by only 2 points more than she did at this time. Michelle, having covered both of these cycles, to you and then Donny, what do you make of that comparative math?
Look, obviously it's frightening, and obviously the lesson of 2016 is nobody should take anything for granted. And I think that one of the problems in 2016 is that a lot of Democratic voters or potential Democratic voters did take things for granted. They felt like they had license either to stay home or to indulge themselves and vote for a third party. So, look, nobody should act like this is in the bag. I do think there's something different about being up by over 50%, right? Because Trump doesn't just have to sort of make up the gap. He has to pull away some of Biden's support. And so I think that you can look at these numbers and just say, there's far fewer people who are undecided. There's far fewer people who are gettable for Trump at this point, and take some comfort for that if you're terrified of another Trump turn. But yeah, nobody should be relaxing, and I don't think anybody is relaxing.
I'm going to go to Donny first, who's been patiently with us. I see from Roland's face he has other thoughts, but Donny, go ahead first.
There are obviously lessons in 2016, but we're in a very, very different world now. Beyond the racial vileness that basically Trump tried to use in 2018 with the caravan that never showed up, that clearly did not work as the House took 40 seats away. We've got Corona. We've got over 200,000 people dead, heading to 400,000 by the end of the year. And I think particularly as it heats up in October, I think that's going to continue to actually widen those margins. And you also left out Michigan and Wisconsin and Arizona. And so, there might be a couple of those states that are showing kind of nervous signs.
We had Wisconsin in there.
Wisconsin was in there. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. I believe this is a moment in time, and I actually think Trump's going to lose in a landslide. I really don't want to get overconfident, but I think if you take the debate of the other night, any undecided voter, if there are 12 or 14% left, and I don't want to meet them, by the way, because anybody who's undecided at this point, I go, what planet are you living on? I think that if you just saw that debate, you went, do I want more of the same? And you go, no, I just, time for something new. And I think that kind of visceral thing happened in the other direction with Hillary, particularly 10 days out when the Comey emails dropped. I think I'm going to equate the Comey emails with the debate. You saw that and you went, I can't take any more of this. I'll give this guy a chance. And I think all of that kind of what the hell vote goes now for Biden versus it went for Trump. So obviously, the Democrats have got to play like they're from behind. They can't feel good about things.
Although in fairness, Donny, in fairness, James Comey says he thought about it and he still thinks he was right. So
whether he was right or not,
I'm just saying it settles it. No, I mean, I'm joking.
Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, editorialized. And clearly it shifted the election. Comey can think whatever he wants. And I'm a little slow on the take tonight, so excuse me.
No, you're good. Or my joke wasn't funny, and so it didn't even register. But go ahead.
Ari, you are always very funny. Like I said, I'm an older gentleman now. These things, sometimes you have to repeat yourself a couple of times. But something to obviously look at. But I don't believe Trump doubling and tripling down on the racial disgustingness is going to help at this point. I think he's actually doing it as a head fake because there's nowhere else to go right now. And he can't talk about
where does he go?
Well,
to your point, Roland, stay with me. Donny makes a point, and we really go through the evidence. There's a million political opinions. We go through the evidence. I'm going to get to Donny, but on this point about what people saw, this is worth registering because those of us who watch the news, we watch all of it, right? But some people, of course, are busy living their lives. They did tune in, 73 million people. It's one of the highest audiences for any American debate in history. If you look at the comparison here in 2008, about 52 million watched Obama-McCain. In 2016, that was a record 84 million. But Roland, to the point Donny raises, the numbers back up the fact that this was, however unwatchable it seemed, one of the actually most watched debates in the modern era.
But here's the thing that we got to put this thing on the table, and I'm sorry, Michelle. I'm sorry, Donny. It has to be put here. The majority of the electorate are going to be white people. The last election, 72% of all ballots cast were by white Americans. This election, they are estimating is likely going to be 68 or 69%. A tape came out in 2016 that we were sure women were going to be shocked and stunned and just aghast at Donald Trump. And 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. As an African American, I am used to white Americans taking racism and putting it aside and putting their tax cuts in front of it and putting pro-life in front of it and putting housing in front of it, and putting other issues. And so I have to see white America prove to me that they're going to reject the white supremacy of Donald Trump. Because the voters in Iowa didn't reject Steve King.
I'm running over on time, but this is important. I'm going to get Donny, who's literally raising his hand to respond. But just to be clear, Roland, are you saying you think at this moment you see it's likely Donald Trump will be reelected?
No, what I'm saying as a black man, I will never say that publicly. I will say Joe Biden is down 10 points because I don't trust the people who are responding to pollsters, because what you cannot measure is the intensity of people who normally don't vote in elections. And if you roll the tape from 4 years ago, I said the very same thing on MSNBC 60 days out to Hillary, to Podesta, to Robbie Mook. Get your heads out of your iPads and listen to the ground. I simply don't trust that, because the results are the results. We swore women were not going to vote for Trump, and 53% of white women voted for him, and that's how he won.
And if we did roll the tape, to Roland's point, we showed the data tonight, Donny, that in key places, it's narrower than it was then when it still closed for Trump. I got to go to Maxine Waters. Now, let me say this. I got to go to Maxine Waters right after this. It's our shortest 30-second break. But, Donny, you were raising your hand. You get the final rebuttal.
Only because that was a good way. Roland, by the way, I feel your passion. I've been on one of the hours saying that basically if you're voting for Trump, it's one of two reasons. It's an extra $1 in your pocket, or you're a racist, an out racist or a subtle racist, one thing or the other. Having said that, with the backdrop of Corona, with the backdrop of 100,000, of health insurance on the table for 100 million Americans, even if they're not voting with a moral imperative, I think there's enough that's going to take him out of office. And unfortunately, he's there because 40% of this country is still grotesquely racist. So we're on the same page. I think the outcome is going to be much different this time, my friend.
As promised, I got to fit in the break. I want to thank Donny, Michelle. Go ahead, sir.
I'm going to say I'm praying.
Oh, praying. Now, do you pray in or out of that iPad?
No, I pray. Look, my wife is a minister, so trust me, we got prayer warriors to make sure this thug loses in November.
Well, Roland, when I grew up, they always said, you don't need Wi-Fi to reach God.
Precisely.
They didn't really say that, but maybe they'll start saying it. I don't know. Roland, Michelle, and Donny, a lot of passion on important issues. Thank you. As I mentioned, when we're back in 30 seconds.